Let's talk about the role of the auditors. In all the major cases in China, in the US, in Germany, wherever, there have been accounting frauds where the fraud was detected after years of financial reports, financial statements audited and issued with an unqualified audit opinion by reputable audit firms. The trust of the public in audit firms is completely beyond any imagination, and it's overblown. As someone who has worked for over 20 years in one of these organizations, I can tell you, you need to understand what the role of an auditor is and the specific situation for statutory auditors in China. Very often people use the term Big Four and they use the term Big Four firm. There are no Big Four firms. There are international networks that use a common brand, and the largest four of these organizations are called Big Four. They are KPMG, or it's the brand KPMG, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, and PwC. There is no global firm with any of these names. And these organizations are very transparent. If you look at their websites, you will see that they are networks of independent firms. So, if you hear that PwC in China was now banned from auditing for 6 months, or that they had to pay a fine, this is related to a Chinese legal entity that is part of the PwC franchise. It is a franchise. But important is to understand whatever gets audited in China is audited by a Chinese firm, by a Chinese legal entity, and not by a group of international auditors. This is very important. And I personally find it questionable that the Big Four or Big Six or Big Eight, is depending on how you want to define and create the boundaries of large organizations that offer audit services, that they create the illusion that there is some form of international involvement. It's not. As a matter of fact, China is very particular about data transfer and state secret, and they definitely do not want anybody from the US flying in, auditing a state-owned enterprise and getting access to sensitive information. This is not specific to China. Every country does that. It's the same in the United States, it's the same in Italy, in Germany, and so forth and so on. But for you, it's very important to understand, be it Evergrande, be it Luckin Coffee, they were audited by Chinese audit firms that were part of an international brand. This is number one. Another thing is, what is the role of a statutory auditor of financial statements? And here China is very similar to what you can find in Europe, in the US, and other markets. Auditors go through financial statements that were prepared by management. And the only thing they do is to say that based on the information that was given to these auditors, that the numbers that are presented are in accordance with the Chinese accounting standards. They do not more, no less, sometimes they do less. But what is important is to understand these guys are comparable to someone like your annual tax inspection of your car. If you pass, doesn't mean your car is worth a lot or great. It just means you're allowed to use your car in public traffic. And it is the same with audited financial statements. And the fact that companies like Evergrande or Luckin Coffee have overstated their revenues to a massive extent, and this was not uncovered by the auditors, shows that the process doesn't provide much assurance. And I want to explain why. You need to understand the business culture. In China and elsewhere, the company that gets audited is the customer. They pay. And particularly in the Chinese business context, a customer has the say. And the customer is not to be questioned, challenged, or disputed. Now, you have to challenge your customer. This is totally, I would say, counterintuitive to the Chinese business culture. Checking your customer and challenging your customer is not part of the deal. Also, a fraud investigation is not part of a statutory audit. There is a set of audit procedures determined by the regulators. They're called standards on auditing. There's an international framework called ISA, International Standards on Auditing, and China has standards on auditing. Again, like its accounting standards, they are very comparable to what you find internationally. The problem is the application. The problem is the limited mandate. And the other problem is the practice. And I know what I'm talking about. When I started as an associate in an accounting firm in Germany, we had to work many hours. We just came out of university. We were sent to the client with many questions. We were trained, but most of the time spent on audit is time spent by rather junior staff. Audit firms make their money by sending young people to the customers. And yes, the working papers are reviewed, but it is not the same like sending highly experienced people to the field. And they don't do that for cost reasons. The other issue is revenue per partner is the most important figure according to which partners in these accounting firms are measured. And this revenue pressure always puts them into a constant conflict. Should I reject this client? Should I challenge this client, who then might choose not to work with me anymore? And that has for that individual partner enormous consequences. In other words, the whole structure of challenging your client is not favorable to the audit partners. Hiring very expensive and seasoned staff is not enabling them to make the profits they want. And one other thing is, audit firms don't earn much for an audit. That might surprise you, but you can look in the public financial statements of companies and you will see very often how much is paid in audit fees, and you will see it's a tiny amount given the size of the company. That means audit firms are not paid well, and because of that, they are forced to look at the cost and have largely junior staff to do the work. Yes, the work gets reviewed, but that is not sufficient. Once a primary data point has not been really uncovered, for example, overstated revenues, it's very difficult for the audit partner or senior manager who will use the working paper to find the issue. So the mandate, the whole setup, the commercial structure does not really make the auditors a reliable counterpart that helps to uncover misstatements in financial statements, be it in China, be it elsewhere. But I think in China it's pronounced because of the business context, the business culture, and because also of the enormous revenue pressure that exists for partners in these firms.